warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back to our weekly Seerah class, Alhamdulillah. So, tonight, inshallah, we'll be, as I mentioned last week, we'll be looking at finally the hijrah of the Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the hijrah from Mecca to Medina. And I think it's very fortunate for us that we are finding ourselves in the month of Safar, on possibly one of the last days of the month, or the last day of the month of Safar. And we'll be starting the month of Rabiul Awwal, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. And that is the month in which the hijrah took place, in Rabiul Awwal. So, as we know, coming from last week, we had those Aqaba pledges, we had those groups of people that came to accept Islam and from Medina. So the previous 3 years, groups of men, and the most recent and the last of the group of 70 came from Medina to Makkah to find out more about Islam, who is Muhammad that they're speaking about, the Arabian Peninsula, who's this guy, what is he preaching, right? And so Islam and the Muslims managed to get a foothold in the city of Medina, known at that time as Yathrib. So, in that way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also supported and aided and further strengthened the Muslims as the two main tribes that began to accept Islam, and the two main tribes that were of Medina were coming together slowly but surely, looking to accept Islam. So, from this point onwards, Sheikh Raihan al-Bulti in his book, he comments, before he even begins speaking about the hijrah, he has a short word where he speaks about jihad, the concept of jihad and its legitimacy. So he has a very in-depth discussion about jihad, which hopefully I will try to summarize, inshallah. But he first defines what is jihad. And he says that jihad refers to the exertion of effort for the sake of Allah and for the sake of establishing an Islamic society. Armed struggle being just one aspect of this effort for the sake of Allah and for the sake of establishing a Muslim society. But the aim of jihad is the establishment of an Islamic society with the formation of a proper Islamic state. That is what jihad aims for. But jihad did not come, the command for jihad, as we know, did not come immediately. There were stages, there were phases through which this concept of jihad had come down, or was passed. So in the beginning it was limited to just peaceful invitation to worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that the Muslims endure whatever comes their way. Peaceful invitation was the first stage. Soon after the hijrah, the next stage was defensive warfare. That is, that if they are met with a force, that they repel that force in like kind. So an eye for an eye. But the Muslims will only attack if they were attacked first, defensive warfare. Soon after that, or rather sometime after that, the permission from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came, and the Muslims were given permission to fight against anyone who stood in the way of establishment, or of the establishment of an Islamic society, of an Islamic state. Because that is still the aim of jihad, an establishment of an Islamic state. of an Islamic society. Thereafter, right, any dealings with atheists or idol worshippers or polytheists, nothing was accepted from them except that they accepted Islam or that they leave the state, right? But for Ahlul Kitab, the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians, they were accepted to live in the Islamic state provided that they paid that tax called jizya. But these later stages only happened quite some time after the Hijrah. For these first 13 years in Mecca, that first jihad, that first striving for the sake of Allah, the way that they did that was through peaceful invitation to the deen. They only started fighting after the Hijrah, but that fighting was in defense of themselves and their lives and their money and their wealth and their religion. But at the end of the day, the point of jihad is still the establishment of an Islamic state. So Sheikh Raihan, he first defines what is jihad so we can understand what we are speaking about. As the fuqaha, the Islamic jurists, they differentiate between jihad and fighting, for example, to defend your life. If someone comes and tries to rob you or mug you, that's not jihad. After that, he goes into and unpacks how the enemies of Islam have tried to demote and attack Islam on this very point of jihad. And he goes into the different tactics and theories, which we will not delve into for tonight. But I do recommend everyone to go and look up and read Sheikh Raihan's book, Fiqh Seerah, and engage with that lovely discussion that he has there. But the Hijrah. With the Hijrah, it did not happen immediately. There was preparations that had to take place, of course, because it's a travel, it's an immigration. People have to prepare for the journey. So once the Muslims from Medina left from Aqaba, right? And they were this foothold, this extra hope for the Muslims, that they could another source of strength for Muslims. Sometime after that, the Quraysh and the leaders, the polytheists in Mecca, they were increasing the abuse of Muslims in Mecca. It became more and more difficult for Muslims to stay in Mecca. It became more and more harsh in the conditions that they were living in. And being put under by them, Quraysh, was becoming unbearable. So the Sahaba of the Nabi Muhammad, they complained to him and said, Ya Rasulullah, it's difficult. And they complained of their suffering, they complained of their torture, and they asked for permission to emigrate, to leave Mecca, to go somewhere else, to go to Medina. So the Prophet ﷺ gave him permission and advised him to go to Yathrib. At the time, Yathrib, now known as Medina. And told him whoever wishes to go, to leave, go to Yathrib, go to Medina. And then so one by one, group by group, the Muslims of Mecca started leaving for Medina, helping each other wherever they could help, coming through monetary aid, through physical protection, through offering a ride on a camel horse, however it came, the Muslims were helping each other one by one, group by group, to live, to prepare for Medina, to leave for Medina. So of the first of the Sahaba to reach Medina was Abu Salama ibn Abdul Asad, and he was followed by Amir ibn Rabi'ah, with his wife Layla bint Abi Hishma, who was the first woman traveling in a camel group to reach Medina. And then they were followed by other companions in more groups. After some time, all of these Muslims from Medina, these now known as Muhajirun, they were looked after and stayed in the homes of the Ansar, the helpers of Medina, who gave them support and encouragement and shelter and provisions. All of these Muslims that were traveling were doing it in secret. Otherwise, Quraysh would find out and kill them. Makes sense. Because Quraysh at the time also became aware of the fact that the Nabi Muhammad had help from outside of Mecca, had help from other tribes outside of Mecca. Which, if you're thinking about it politically, it would be equivalent to another country intervening with the democracy of another and supporting one political party and giving them aid, leading to a coup d'etat, the like they are. So the Quraysh leaders are thinking in these lines, perhaps, that yes, Muhammad getting outside help. This is possibility that Muhammad and this outside help is going to come to Makkah and overthrow him. So Quraysh was very aware of this, and any Muslims that were leaving obviously would lead eventually to become the strength of the Muslims against the Qurayshis. But nonetheless, the Muslims that were leaving were doing it in secret, except for one. One brilliant Sahaba that we might be able to case, who told everyone, I'm going. You want to stop me? You can meet me in the ravine, you can battle it out. If you want to make your wife a widow, your child an orphan, your parents have no more children, you can meet me around the valley, and we can fight it out, and we can see then what happens. The companion that left and told everyone that is leaving, he was open about his making hijrah, was none other than Umar ibn al-Khattab. So we told by Ali ibn Abi Talib the following, that when Umar decided to go to Medina, decided to immigrate, he put his sword in his scabbard, put his sword on, he put his bow over his shoulder, and some arrows in his hand, his walking stick, and obviously some provisions or whatever. Went to the Kaaba, he did 7 tawafs around the Kaaba, then at Maqam Ibrahim, he made salah, and then he said to everyone who was there, whoever of you wishes to bereave his mother, or orphan his children, or widow his wife, let him come meet me on the other side of this ravine. Basically, he said, if you want to stop me, you can try and stop me, but I'm going to fight you, and you're going to lose. But with him, obviously Umar being one of the strong, powerful guys of the Muslims, right? With him followed a group of the oppressed and miserable and Muslims that were really weak, struggling. And obviously he took them with him because of the guidance and instruction of Muhammad to protect them as well, of course. So in this manner of excluding Umar's manner, Muslims were leaving Mecca for Medina piece by piece. Until the only one left in Mecca was the Nabi Muhammad, Abu Bakr, Ali, and those that were in prison and being tortured, and those that were too weak, too sick to travel. So these were the only people left in Medina. The Nabi Muhammad didn't leave yet because he was not given permission yet to leave. So one of the implications of the hijrah, what are the implications of this whole scenario of the hijrah, right? That the Nabi Muhammad would be the leader in Medina, the leader for all the Muslims. He would become the head of the state for the Muslims in Medina. And economically and politically speaking, it was a threat for the Meccans because Medina was positioned on a trade route to Syria. So if the Muslims wanted to, they could stop Mecca's trade with Sham, which would mean devastation. Also, with the Nabi Muhammad becoming the leader, becoming the head of state in Medina, he would be uniting the tribes in Medina. Because remember, in the places of Aqaba, that first initial group, they came complaining that their tribes were at war with each other and it was happening for a long time. There's just no peace, no unity. With the Nabi Muhammad stepping into the picture, there would be that unity, that brotherhood, that peace among the tribes of Medina. Of course, then Medina would also become this safe havens for all the Muslims, for all the Muhajirun, and they would be able to practice Islam without being harassed, without being persecuted, without being tortured. However, at the same time, in order for them to gain this freedom, what they had to give up, what they had to sacrifice was literally everything in Mecca. All their money, all their wealth, all the land that they owned, even the relationship with family members they had to sacrifice. All to get this new life in Medina. And as such, as we know, the Hijrah would mark the starting point for our calendar. That's why I call it the Hijri calendar, connected to the Hijrah. So, of course, Quraysh, always the Quraysh, they came to know about the Nabi Muhammad ﷺ planning to leave as well. Because all the Muslims were going one by one, it would make sense that obviously then the Muhammad ﷺ would be leaving as well. So the leaders of Quraysh and the representatives of the different tribes in Mecca attended a meeting and it's referred to as the Nadwa Council. And in this meeting, they decided to kill. They came up with a plan to try to kill the Prophet ﷺ. And there were many of them. Right? Abu Salama, not Abu Salama, Abu Jahl bin Hisham, Jubayr bin Mut'im, Abu Mukhtar bin Hisham, Hakim bin Hizam, Umayyah bin Khalaf, all of them representing the different tribes. And they were sitting there discussing how are we going to get Muhammad, how are we going to kill Muhammad. And it's even said that Iblis was at this meeting. This guy is some old guy. And he's said he's from Najd, which is a region in the desert. Even said Iblis was at this meeting and gave them ideas. And they were discussing different options. How are they going to deal with this Muhammad? Lifelong imprisonment, expelling from Mecca. But Abu Jahl suggested, and they all agreed and accepted. Abu Jahl's suggestion was to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ. So how he suggested they go about it was that each of the tribes put forward one of their strongest young men. And they all strike, stab, slash, try to, kill the Nabi Muhammad ﷺ at the same time with their swords. So that the blood money would be distributed amongst all of those tribes. Because how the Arab system worked at the time, it was an eye for an eye. If you kill one of my tribe members, or you kill one of yours, or you pay blood money, or we go to war with the tribe. But now, if there are 10 tribes, for one tribe to go to war with 10 tribes would be impossible for them to win. So the group assassination, Abu Jahl was part of it. Hakim bin Abdullah al-As, Uqba ibn Abi Mu'ayyid, Nadir bin Harith, Umayyah bin Khalaf, Zama'a bin al-Aswad, Tu'ayma bin Adi, Abu Lahab, of course, Ubayy bin Khalaf, Nabih bin al-Hajjaj, his brother Munbih bin al-Hajjaj. All of these guys, different guys. At the same time, they're from different tribes planning to assassinate the Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions their plan. In Surah Al-Anfal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ يَمْكُرُوا بِكَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. When the believers plotted against you, يُثْبِتُوكَ أَوْ يَقْتُلُوكَ أَوْ يُخْرِجُوكَ, to imprison you or kill you or expel you. وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. They planned and Allah planned, but Allah is the best of planners. That's where we get that famous part of the ayah that everyone quotes these days. So, obviously, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew of Quraysh's plan. Jibreel was sent to the Prophet to warn him and give finally permission to the Nabi Muhammad to leave Mecca. So that very afternoon, the Prophet made arrangements to leave with Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, was the only Sahaba to make the hijrah with the Nabi Muhammad. So that night, that same night, this group of assassins from Quraysh, they surrounded the house of the Nabi Muhammad. But the Nabi Muhammad asked his cousin Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu to sleep in his bed to take his place. So then the Prophet ﷺ left in the early hours of the morning. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put these assassins to sleep. They were waiting outside to get him. But they fell asleep. So the Prophet ﷺ left in the early hours of the morning and threw a handful of dust and he recited from Surah Yasin, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْ بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ سَدًّا وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ سَدًّا فَأَغْشَيْنَاهُمْ فَهُمْ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ. And we placed a barrier in front of them and a barrier behind them and we have enshrouded them so they cannot see. So they were blind, even if they were to wake up, they wouldn't see the Nabi Muhammad ﷺ. So from there, the Nabi Muhammad ﷺ went straight to the house of Sayyidina Abu Bakr. And from there they went to hide in the cave of Mount of Jabal Thawr. Jabal Thawr. Jabal Noor is a different Jabal. Jabal Thawr is where Prophet was hiding, that cave that he was hiding before the Hijrah. So they spent about the Nabi Muhammad and Abu Bakr. They spent about 3 days in Jabal Thawr before they left for Medina, right? So Sayyidina Abu Bakr's son Abdullah and his daughter Asma and his servant Amir bin Fuhayra. These were the 3 that were responsible for bringing the food and drink to the Nabi Muhammad and Abu Bakr during the night. So Sayyidina Abdullah would come and he would bring news about what's happening in Mecca. What the Quraysh are saying, what they're planning, who they're targeting, where they're moving about, what's the next move, as far as he could, as far as he could find out. Right? And Asma, she made sure that her father, Abu Bakr, and the Prophet ﷺ were getting enough food, water and drink, etc. And Amir bin Fuhayra, he was Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's slave. He was herding the sheep. So he would herd the sheep at night to go and graze and rest near Jabal Thawr. The reason for that, to cover the tracks of Abdullah and cover the tracks of the Nabi Muhammad. So it was just a whole team working together to get the Prophet and Abu Bakr out of Mecca. So they stayed there for 3 days and 3 nights. So Abu Bakr, and when he left with the Nabi Muhammad, he took all of his money with him. And they say it's about 5,000 or 6,000 dirhams. And his father, Abu Quhafa, was blind. And he came in at the time and he said to his granddaughter Asma, seems like your father has left you. He didn't even leave you money at all. But so to make sure that he didn't make that Abu Quhafa didn't make a big fuss about it or draw attention to it, the story goes that Asma, she put a cloth over some pebbles or stones on the windowsill and showed the grandfather, no, look, here's some money that he left behind, obviously just to make sure he doesn't spoil the beans. So anyways, after these 3 days, just before they were ready to leave, because right now, remember, the Quraysh haven't seen Muhammad for 3 days in Mecca. For 3 days he was missing from the city. So then they set out, spreading around the area of Mecca, looking for him in places that they might suspect where he was hiding. So eventually they reached the cave of Thawr, Thawr. and they're all around. It's not a very big cave, right? It's not a very under the ground cave either. And Abu Bakr, he whispered to the Nabi Muhammad Sallallahu, if they just look down at their feet, they would see us. If they just look down. They just have to look down and see us. You must just think about it. Quraysh, they're willing to do anything to stop Muhammad Sallallahu. They did everything they could. They hired scouts and bounty hunters and put a bounty on the head of 100 camels for the person who gets Muhammad Sallallahu. But the thing that stopped him from looking down at their feet was looking at in the direction of the cave. As we know, was the nest of the dove and the web of the spider. But when Abu Bakr, he's worried, he's anxious, his nerves are shocked, because he's looking up through the little gap and he can see Quraysh. It's like, what are we going to do? Then Muhammad says, Abu Bakr, quiet, silent. What do you think of those? Of those two with whom the third is Allah? I was telling him that they're not alone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in Surah Tawbah, the ayah, إِذْ هُمَا فِي الْغَارِ إِذْ يَقُولُ لِصَاحِبِهِ. Remember when the two of them, فِي الْغَارِ, they were in the cave, إِذْ يَقُولُ لِصَاحِبِهِ, he said to his friend, لَا تَحْزَنْ, do not worry, do not be sad, do not be grief-stricken. إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَنَا. فأنزل الله سكينته عليه وأيده بجنود لم تروها. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala supported them with forces that did not see. So in this ayah, Surah Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this event, mentions this the story. So Quraysh is still looking. They are still eager, they still have not given up on finding Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But once these Quraysh guys, once the scouts left the surrounds of Ghar Thawr, and then Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, they left and they came out to meet a guide, someone that knew the route from Mecca to Medina. His name was Abdullah bin Arqa. He wasn't yet Muslim, but he was trustworthy, and they could trust him. And they hired him to guide them along that hidden pathways from Mecca to Medina. So, with Abdullah ibn Arqa as the guide, they proceeded on the way following the path less taken on their way to Medina. And they say this path was along the coast, closer to the coast. But in Mecca, they still had that promise that when both Muhammad and Abu Bakr, they would be paid the equivalent of 2 men's blood money, which was a lot. They would still have 100 camels also. So one day, a group of men from the tribe of Mudhij, they were holding a little meeting, and a man approached them and he said, I just saw a dark patch along the coast. I think it was Muhammad and Abu Bakr. Something. I saw this figures on the coast. I think it could be them. So one of the men that was attending this meeting, his name was Seerah ibn Jurshum. And he was one of the best trackers and riders of the desert. Seerah was one of the best bounty hunters. So he was certain that this guy saw Nabi Muhammad and Abu Bakr. He was certain. But he didn't want anyone else to go after them, so he discouraged anyone from going and from investigating this hearsay, this site, this rumor. So he said, oh, the people you saw, they were these two guys. Who went out with their scouts to look for something. He told them a story. He told them a story to make them not go look out and investigate. Oh, was it Muhammad and Abu Bakr or was it them, was it not? He tried to downplay it so that they wouldn't go. So, Surah tried to play it cool, tried to keep it natural. He stayed at that meeting for another hour, then he rose. He didn't want to show them that he was interested in going to investigate this. No. He's like, okay, stay with the meeting a little bit, make it look like I'm doing nothing, like I'm not interested. He gathered his horse, and he set off in that very direction where this guy said he thinks he saw the Nabi Muhammad and Abu Bakr and the guy Abdullah. So as he got closer, because he was certain it was them, he knew it was them, and he could see them. He was riding on his horse, and he was one of the fastest riders in the desert. He was one of the best bounty hunters in the desert. As soon as he got closer, because he was eager to get this reward. 100 camels is a lot. Even nowadays, I was in camel nowadays. It's crazy amount. So he was riding his horse, getting closer, getting closer. But the closer he got, his horse stumbled. His horse stumbled and fell into the sand. A horse that was bred and born and bred to run in the desert fell. Like tripped over nothing, And okay, got back up. Try it again. Horse fell again. He got up. No sooner had the horse got up and put its, pulled its feet out of the mud or out of the quicksand or whatever, then like a cloud of dust was stirred up in front of the party of the Muhammad. Some sort of wall of dust, of sand, rose up like a shield, like a curtain. And he saw this. He was like, whoa. He realized finally that the Prophet was special, that he was protected. Because how can a man of the desert, whose horse is born and bred for the desert, fall over and stumble so many times? It doesn't make sense. So he realized, no. The Prophet, this Muhammad, he is a special and protected person. There's no ways that he's going to be anywhere close to this guy. So he asked permission to come close to the Nabi Muhammad, and he begged for forgiveness also. So when he got close and when he begged for forgiveness, he offered them the Nabi Muhammad and Abu Bakr. He offered them food and water, provisions. And the Prophet said, no, shukran, we don't need it. But don't tell anyone what happened. I had this plan along. Don't tell people what just happened. Don't tell people that you found us. Don't tell people of our plan. And Surah clarified, rest assured I'll protect you like that. And he returned to Makkah. Surah returned to Makkah, said nothing to no one, said nothing that might reveal the location of the Muhammad and Abu Bakr or And it was that morning he set out with the intention of slaying the Nabi Muhammad. And that same evening he returned with the intention to shelter and protect them from any harm that might happen to them. So the Prophet right just before Surah left, Surah asked for forgiveness, right? And the Prophet and he asked for some protection. And this protection was written on a piece of parchment or whatever by Abdullah. So as he was leaving, it said the Prophet said to him, how will you feel the day you put on the bracelets of Kisra? Kisra was one of the known wealthy kingdoms or palaces of the Persian Empire. So Suraqa thought, no, that's impossible. But this promise would be fulfilled 10 years later. And at the Battle of Hunayn, which happened after the Fath Makkah, after the conquest of Makkah, Suraqa took out the same piece of parchment that was given to him, this protection. Prophet recognized it and he gave him protection. You know, because it's a battle. You're going to kill Suraqa. He pulls out his, basically, get out of jail free card, you could say. And the Prophet saw it and said, okay, it's valid. But then after this, he accepted Islam. And then amazingly, 10 years later, during the time the Khalifa of Sayyidina Umar, the Muslims, they conquered Persia. And among the booty, the stuff that they collected after the battle was the bracelets of Kisra in front of everyone in Medina. Umar, he gave Surah these bracelets and presented it to him and fulfilled the promise and the prediction of the Prophet 10 years earlier. So, on the way from Mecca to Medina on this journey, about halfway, right? The Prophet and Abu Bakr, they rested at this tent in a place called Qudayd. And the tent belongs to Ma'bad. And this is now another instance where where we can see one of the miracles of Nabi Muhammad. So Ma'bad was asked if she had anything to eat or drink, and she said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't have anything." She just had an old goat, which was really old, so old it couldn't give milk anymore. So the Prophet, was like, okay, but he still asked for permission to milk the goat, and obviously, to her surprise, the Prophet got milk from this goat for all of them. And there was even enough milk for her husband, Abu Ma'bad. So the Prophet, Abu Bakr, Ma'bad, Abu Ma'bad, and Abdullah the guide. They got milk from this goat that was supposedly, too old to give milk. So she explained to her husband, Abu Ma'bad, because he was out in the right? Because he was surprised to see milk from this old goat that they have never milked for such a long time. She explained to him what happened and an account with the Nabi Muhammad and referred to him as a blessed man. So her description, Ma'bad, it is a well-known narration. And she said the following: I saw a man who is clearly handsome with a beautiful face. He is well built, neither blemished by a big belly nor disfigured by an unusually small head. The pupils of his eyes were very dark, his eyelashes are very long, the area around his pupils is extremely white. His eyebrows are perfectly closed. He has very dark hair, a rather long neck, and a thick beard. When he remains silent, he is ever contemplative. When he speaks, eminence and splendor show his words. His words are like sliding stringed pearls. He is a gifted orator whose words are neither too few nor too many. He has the clearest wand and the most audible voice as he speaks. When you look at him from afar, he is the most handsome of all people, and when you move closer to him, he is the most pleasant of them. You will never be tired of looking at him. He is like a branch between two branches. He is the most handsome of the three and most important of them. He has companions who honor him, and when he speaks, they listen to his words, and when he commands, they hasten to carry out his order. They serve and gather around him, and he neither frowns nor nags. So this is the description that we get from Ma'bad about Nabi Muhammad. May we be able to imbibe those qualities. So this journey from Mecca to Medina took approximately 11 days. Day one was the first of Rabiul Awwal. So we can think until next week, we're still on that Hijrah. In 2 weeks' time, we will complete the Hijrah. Because from Makkah to Medina, it's quite a long way. It's quite a distance. So, on the 8th of Rabiul Awwal, so after just over a week of travel, the Prophet ﷺ arrives at Quba. And here the Prophet ﷺ would spend the next 4 days, from the Monday to the Thursday, at Quba. And he would be hosted by the tribe Amr bin Auf. In Quba is where we know the first mosque was built and established. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَمَسْجِدٌ أُسِّسَ عَلَى التَّقْوَى من أول يوم أحق أن تقوم فيه رجال يحبون أن يتطهروا والله يحب المطهرين. And in Quba, this is where the Prophet said that he who purifies himself at his home, makes wudu at his home, and comes to Masjid Quba and makes 2 rak'at, the reward for that 2 rak'at would be the reward of an Umrah. So inshallah, when we go to Umrah and Hajj and get the opportunity to make Salah in Masjid Quba, Allah grant us that reward of an Umrah. Ameen. But remember, who was the one that was still behind in Mecca just before the Prophet ﷺ left? Was Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu. Just to mention quickly why he was still in Mecca, he had to stay behind in Mecca because the Prophet ﷺ was still entrusted by the people of Quraysh, Muslims and non-Muslims, to look after their belongings and their wealth and whatever they left behind to look after, because they knew, even the Quraysh, even some of his enemies knew that yes, Muhammad is maybe a threat to the social structure that they have, but even so, he's a trustworthy man. He's someone that we can rely on and know that he's going to honor any agreement that he enters in. So, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu was returning all of these things that the people entrusted to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And while the Prophet was in Quba, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu also caught up with him. So, to go into a little bit more detail, one of the people of that tribe, Banu Amr ibn Auf, he stayed sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the home of Kulthum bin Hilm. And Ali radiallahu anhu joined the later. So he sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Quba then made his way to Medina. So it was Mecca, Ghar al-Thawr for 3 days. Then on the 1st of Rabiul Awwal, traveled, halfway point, the tent of Ummi Ma'bad, and traveled for a little bit more, reached Quba after 7 or 8 days. Stayed in Quba for about 4 or 5 days, right? Which brings us to the 11th to the 12th of Rabiul Awwal. And from Quba on the 12th of Rabiul Awwal, then Ibrahim Sallallahu entered into Medina. So, when the Prophet ﷺ arrived in Medina, all the Ansar and everyone else that was there, massive crowd around the camel of the Nabi Muhammad ﷺ. Massive crowd, they all gathered. They all tried to grab the reins of the camel, tried to lead the camel to their home. But then the Prophet ﷺ told them, he gave the order, look, leave my camel, let her be. She is under orders by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reach a particular destination. So basically they said, let the camel decide where, where it wants to stop. And wherever it stops, that's where I'm going to stay. So this camel is a she camel. Walked through the city and the alleyways until it reached a place, a piece of land owned by these two orphaned boys that belonged to the Najjar tribe. They're orphans, but they owned this piece of land and it belonged, and they were from the Najjar tribe, one of the major tribes in Medina. But it was close to the home of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. So the Prophet said, this is where we stay, inshallah. And Abu Ayyub came and escorted the Prophet to his home. And there is where the Prophet stayed. It wasn't long, but that's where the Prophet stayed, and we will go into more detail of that next week, inshallah. But this concept of sacrifice, if we were to look into it more and try to connect with the Muhajirun, the Muslims that left Mecca, we would eventually realize that that is what it means to go in the path of Allah. That is what jihad is, to strive for the sake of Allah. Because they literally left everything behind for the sake of Allah. Their homeland, their wealth, their property, all to secure their Iman, to make sure that their Iman remain pure and untainted. And that is a model that we can learn from. The people of Mecca did not compromise on their deen in any way. In any way that you could possibly think. Oh, okay, maybe eat this a halal. Okay, maybe it might be haram. Maybe we can do this maybe in 1 year. I'm struggling a bit. Okay, I missed the salah. Okay, I'm struggling a little bit. Maybe do this and maybe do that. But these muhajirun, they never did anything that would affect or compromise the Iman. That is a model that we can look at and learn from. And not only the muhajirun, we can look at the Ansar, the people of Medina that took in every one of those Muslims from Mecca, took them into their homes. Anything that they had, right down the middle, in half, they split. If the men had 2 wives, they'd give the 1 wife to the guy from Mecca. If they had 100 acres of land, they'd split right down the middle, 50 acres for you, 50 acres for me. Whatever they had, they shared and they gave without asking questions, without thinking twice, encouraging and assisting and doing whatever they can, helping if they could. And that is also another model for us as Muslims about this, to understand the sense of brotherhood and sisterhood in Islam. That ties that they had together was stronger than the ties of blood, of kinship, family. What connected them was deen. That surpassed every understanding that they had. It was so strong, the sense of brotherhood. It was so much more powerful than family ties. The laws of inheritance was in the initial stages based on these religious bonds. If you were Muslim, you stood to gain from inheritance first. Eventually, the laws of inheritance would change. The family inherited from family. But this was after some time after Islam was established in Medina. So Inshallah, as we go into this month of Rabiul Awwal, right, we need to also reflect on the hijrah, starting from tomorrow, starting from tonight. Reflect on the hijrah, reflect on the sacrifice of the Muslims, reflect on everything that they had to go through for us to now enjoy this Islam that we have, this free Islam, this peaceful Islam, this Islam that after so many years of struggle and sacrifice, we now have literally on a golden platter. We are free in this country to practice it without worry or fear that we won't be able to practice it. Alhamdulillah. So in these days of Rabiul Awwal, Alhamdulillah ala ni'mat al-Islam, Alhamdulillah ala ni'mat al-Iman. Because too often do we find people trading their deen for something else in return of this dunya. Too often we find people being placed in that position or being forced to be in that position where they are considering trading their deen for something of the dunya, which is a very unfortunate circumstance to be in. For the men, for the women, for the old people, and I think especially for our children and the youth in the private schools and high schools, even those at the universities, where they are being attacked and targeted from every direction, and given the idea that it is okay to sacrifice your day for something of the dunya, for a moment, for one night, for a week, for a year, for a month, for however long you study. To sacrifice your deen that people have sacrificed their lives just to have. And the other thing that we find also too often are Muslims not being kind to Muslims, Muslims not wanting to help Muslims, Muslims being unfair and unjust in their trade and dealings with other Muslims. We already have, unfortunately, in this culture and city of ours, this concept of slums, slums, which is sad. That Muslims don't want to deal with Muslims because they know their business ethics, for example, are poor. With that, because they know they're going to be cheated. They're going to be given something cheap. They're going to be sold out. It's unfortunate that we have that in our culture, in our society. Whereas looking back to the Ansar of Medina, that was the last thing on their minds. That maybe even, was a thought that crossed their minds. And the Prophet said that a Muslim to another Muslim, or the Muslims are like one body. If the one part gets sore, the rest of the body feels it. But that also means that the Muslims are one body. Your body functions. Parts of it do not function independently. Every function of your body is dependent on another, affects another. Prophet also said that a believer to another believer is like a building whose different parts enforce and support each other. So looking at the Ansar, that's something we should learn, inshallah. So going into this month of Rabiul Awwal, may Allah help us and guide us, protect us, Ameen, Ya Rabbal Alameen, grant us fully understanding and tawfiq to learn and to look at and learn from the Seerah of the Nabi Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and grant us the ability to implement whatever lessons we learn from that, inshallah. I'll see you next week, inshallah. We will be looking deeper into the events that are taking place after this hijrah, after the arrival of the Nabi Muhammad in Medina. Inshallah, we're hoping to learn more from it. بإذن الله تعالى. شكرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.